Small-town 16-year-old Sonia Lucille Stevens lived in what was least of her concerns. Sonia left that night on account of her aunt's tendency to insist that she and everyone around her die. No one could blame her, really. There was no secret that no one in their right mind could ignore. Everyone in the Stevens family had died before the age of 30, and at the ripe young age of 29 years and counting, her aunt was convinced she was next. Sonia rode off on her bike that evening, against the wishes of her clairvoyant aunt. Sonia and her brother Sidney Lewis had lived with their morbid Aunt Claire for 11 years. When Sonia was 5 years old and Sidney was 6, their mother abandoned them. The only thing that remained of their mother was a single photograph, the 2 stories Aunt Claire repeatedly told of their mother in a pair of red shoes she left behind. That spring evening, the birds were finding love and losing their way, and the street sweepers, had they been 5 blocks closer to sweeping away the remains of winter, it might have prevented her loss of traction, which caused her to take a rather brutal fall. Claire was her mother's youngest sister. She made wonderful macaroni, potato, green pepper hot dish, and yet managed to create horrible batches of asparagus soup straight out of the Campbell's can. By the age of 18, Aunt Claire had lost most, if not all, of her back teeth. Because the replacement rate was much slower than the loss rate, she often resorted to cooking what one might consider soft, even mushy foods. Aunt Claire wasn't so bad, though. Had she not constantly dwelled on her current disease, she might have even been a good role model for the children. Sonia's brother Sidney stayed inside because of the constant threat of rain and electrical sources. This fear of being electrocuted was brought on by the fact that, well, yes, he had been electrocuted as a child, and yes, his feet had blackened because of it, but most of his fear resided in the fact that his father's and grandfather's deaths were caused by severe electrical shock. Sidney writes songs about his aunt's cooking and his fear of robots on his acoustic guitar. The neighbor, Leroy McNellans, often stops over after school and listens out of the corners of his eyes. Sonia takes comfort in the regularity of their presence, but despises their lack of interest in life. The only photo the children have of their mother is enough to keep their imaginations alive. Sonia's mother always wears the same black and white coat with orange scarf and red shoes. Throughout most of her daydreams, her mother was always leaving, driving away in her car with the windows rolled down, or waiting for the train to come at the station. In her mind, somehow, over time, the memories of her mother had merged with those of her aunts, and the only factual thing she had left, the photograph. Chloe was Sonia's best and only friend. She lived across town in a quiet neighborhood in between 2 churches. Her father was a Baptist pastor at the church on the right, and the church on the left was, as her father put it, a little less than ungodly. Chloe, who was also 16, got straight A's in school and joined numerous after-school activities. She had a clamor of interests and hobbies, including the Girl Scouts and chess club. At the age of 11, Chloe began developing breasts, interest in boys, nicotine, alcohol, and cherry red lipstick, much to the denial of her oblivious mother and father. It was Chloe who introduced Sonia to the virtues of rock and roll music and marijuana. It was Chloe who was last on her mind that night as she sped down the road.